You're listening to the Veterinary Innovation Podcast.
You're listening to the Veterinary Innovation Podcast. My name is Shawn Wilkie, and along with my awesome co-host, we interview the innovators in this space every week. Ivan, go ahead and get us started, please.
Hey, I'm Ivan Zach. I'm really excited to introduce today a very interesting combination of skills. It's Dr. Oliver Viner. Oliver Viner is a seasoned technology executive with a strong background in veterinary practice, with over 10 years of experience in first opinion veterinary practice, including managing and scaling clinics. Oliver has a deep understanding of the industry. He's actually a vet as well. So he is CTO at Digital Practice and regular writer for the Veterinary Business Journal. As a software engineer, he has developed an online booking platform and client portal, as well as led software development teams. Oliver is also a consultant in PIMS workflows and use of technology in veterinary medicine. As the founder of VetBooker and co-founder of Digital Practice, Oliver has played a key role in the digital transformation of veterinary industry. Additionally, Oliver has a keen interest in blockchain technology, having written smart contracts and worked on NFTs and Web3. Oliver, welcome to the show. Thank you for finding the time.
Thank you for having me.
I just want to clear something for the listeners on the North American side of things. It's the first opinion clinic, so that's what we call general practices in the North American world. And I had a friend who worked with me in SmartFlow. He was really disappointed that that's called first opinion because he used to work in general practice, and he said, "What do you mean first opinion?" And because I'm an ER vet, I used to tell him, "Well, because you always need a second opinion of ER vet," which pissed him off even more. So that's
It can be quite loaded terms. General practice people can find disparaging as well because general practice in itself can be a specialty. So, I think there's always
right.
debate around the right nomenclature to make people feel good about their skills.
Yeah, well, and if he was disappointed with that term, I would find a way to also be sarcastic about it. So but what a pleasure, and it's a unique combination of skills. I've built a product before, but I didn't learn how to write code. I found people that want to write code, and we build a company together. But having both being a veterinarian, and then developer and CTO, I mean, how does that come together? How did you become the technology entrepreneur and the coder as well?
Yeah, so I mean, I guess I was of an age where I sort of grew up with tech. My father's a veterinary surgeon as well, and we have multiple clinics. And at a young age, I found a modem that was looking kind of dusty and had been used at some point, sort of 2,400 baud modem, and decided I was going to play with it and hooked it up and connect it to the early internet, kind of pre World Wide Web. And I think that just sparked a huge interest for me in all things kind of technology. And I just I had tech around because of the clinics, some of these early practice management systems, the kind of green text on black screens, and kind of got in at the ground level and found it super interesting. But equally, that working with animals, that kind of passion for veterinary medicine, was there as well. But it helped to pay for my veterinary degree whilst I was at university. I was building websites for people, but it was kind of the Wild West back then. Nobody really minded having a teenager building their website for them, just kind of freelance back in the I guess beginning of the 2000s. And then I followed that through. Whilst running the clinics, that tech can and should play such an important role, in helping to improve process in the in veterinary businesses, and I guess trying to optimize for that and trying to use the PMSs to their fullest also got me thinking, well, what can I add in to the PMS? What are the PMSs not doing, and how can we make that better? Particularly, I guess, originally around the customer interactions. So, how can you make it easier for customers to book appointments? How can you reduce load on your, on your phones? How can you, capture, more revenue and improve your customer retention? And so, I looked at various online booking solutions, and there were none that I really liked at the time. It was very early market, so I thought, well, I'll just build one for me, and then I commercialized that as VetBooker, and then from there just got more and more involved in the kind of development side. But I sort of built VetBooker entirely on my own, and then more recently have found, enjoyment in still doing the code or some of the code, but having people better than me as well at the code to work with, and to all kind of improve and work together on making great products for vets.
Yeah, that's a ton of sense and leads me directly to my next question, which is what is digital practice and how did you get involved?
So digital practice is a product which is designed to try and solve some of the biggest kind of problems for veterinary clinics today, which is the phones are too busy. There's not enough kind of resource, and fundamentally customers don't want to communicate with you always by phone. I mean, I'll do anything I can to not have to speak to somebody synchronously. If I wanted to book the dentist or book an optician or anything, I don't want to have that synchronous phone call, because I've got to have free time. I've got to be able to get through when they have free time, and it's a difficult process. So digital practice is about meeting the consumer where they already are. So it takes in messages from all of the most popular messaging apps and SMS. So that's Facebook Messenger, WhatsApp, Instagram. We bring those all into one place for clinics. We integrate with the PMS, so we improve kind of workflows within the PMS, and we allow that rich multimedia asynchronous communication.
Makes tons of sense, and I totally get it. So your market today, where are your customers at?
Mostly in the UK, but we've also got a presence in Australia and APAC, and we're looking at expansion through North America as well. We integrate with 5 different PMSs, and some of those have a global footprint, and some of those are more locally relevant. But we're adding new PMS integrations all the time. That kind of PMS integration piece is really interesting at the moment in the space, because there's philosophical approaches that PMS companies can take, which is either to be fully open and leveraging the power of more integrations, or there's those that feel that they are better having more of a closed walled garden approach and allowing certain integrations into certain pieces. And how different PMS companies view that for their revenue streams has quite a knock-on effect on how these integrations can work. But we're certainly keen to integrate with everyone. We're a big believer that choice in the market benefits both the consumers and the clinics, and we've kind of built a modular system that lets us plug in new integrations really quickly.
I love how you call them PMS, which is the terms, or PIMS they call them. But I can't miss the opportunity to show you something on screen here. So when I built SmartFlow, I produced the worst piece of marketing material, which is a bunch of pens that on them it says SmartFlow, the best PMS you've ever had.
Nice.
And in a female-dominated industry,
He still has bags and bags of these pens in his
some
office.
found that it's not funny. Some found this is hilarious, but probably not the dude handing out these pens at the conference to women. So it was just one of those bad marketing decisions.
Maybe I'll start calling it PIMS from now on.
Now I got you thinking. Every time it's going to pop in your head, it's like, I haven't made this mistake. So the integrations and what is so important in this integration? Because as I'm thinking about it, so you connect to any source of where potentially customer is found, right? So whether you're on Instagram, or you're now an old person qualified by using Facebook, or it's whatever media they find you on, or text, I assume is directly from the website when they click on that phone number. But then when it comes into the clinic, is there really a need to be inside of PIMS, or is it really the history retention that is more of a focus? So it's a dual question. So one is that the focus of the integration? The other one is, when you're putting this technology in, what do you need to change or adapt to existing workflows in the clinic, because it's not a common route of communicating with a client? And does it take the part of that edge of the reception, or you go deeper to more of a communication with the veterinarian as well?
Yeah, so I mean, that's great. I think there's quite a lot to unpack there, and I think your first point about what the integration is, how kind of two-way I guess that is, and how important it is. We believe it's really, really important, because veterinary staff are not really, they don't have a lot of time, right? Time's their limited resource, and they don't want to be context shifting, having messages come in. If a message comes in from these sources and it's kind of an unknown kind of person, that's a real, they've got to essentially move over to their PMS. They've got to look up a record. They've got to make sure they've got the right record. It's all prone to error. So as these messages come in, we look the record up on the PMS. We do matching. Got a whole bunch of business logic around that to make it really smart. And then we can pull out the patient data, previous conversations. We can even, show the clinical history, where the reminders are due. And we kind of view that as sort of on a kind of Pareto distribution. At about 80% of those kind of queries coming in, you'll be able to answer just through the platform from the information that we surface. There may be some really detailed information that's still siloed in the PMS you've got to go and get yourself. But then we provide additional ways of context shifting to allow you to pick up that record more seamlessly from the PMS in those PMSs that support it. And to answer your second question, you get the most out of the system the more that you can integrate it with your processes. And there is a change management piece with any piece of software. I think vets are quite guilty as a profession of thinking that they can pay for a piece of software that says it will solve a problem and think that now that they've paid for it, the problem is solved. But that's really just the beginning. And we work really hard with clinics, but also we've really built the system around being easy to learn and sort of on a really simple wedge where we can bring them in to start using it with things like payments or running asynchronous post-operative checks by sending messages to and fro with photos or videos. And once they're really starting to engage with the system, they then can embrace more and more processes. The aim is that eventually it's reductive rather than adding to workflow.
It's so interesting, all of what you said, but I want to shift gears and go in a completely different direction. We're an innovation podcast. We haven't talked about artificial intelligence, OpenAI yet. We haven't had a guest that there was a fit there. But what does the veterinary practice of the future look like with all of these innovations that are happening all around us?
Yeah, I think it's a fascinating question, and I think it's kind of really obviously reaching a kind of crescendo at the moment because we're on this exponential growth of AI, and so I think people expected, myself included, the rate of change to be slower, and then suddenly you use ChatGPT and you see maybe we're a bit closer to AGI than we thought, and AGI is about artificial general intelligence as opposed to just AI. And once AGI is cracked, there's all kinds of deep philosophical questions about what it means for all jobs and humanity as a whole and existential risk and all of these things. But for the veterinary industry, I think that what we need to do is, I think we've done all right in the past, but I think we could do better, is we need to try and embrace it and not be fearful of it and accept the rate of change and where our role fits in that. And I think the key thing is around the relationships that AGI will not replace. And I think that's around the physical delivery of care. But I think a lot of the advice, the interpretation, and some of that kind of science of veterinary medicine will be disrupted. But, I remember when I was at vet school, there was a big emphasis on the fact that it is the art of veterinary medicine and not the science of veterinary medicine. And there is that piece that I think we need to just, really emphasize as, AI continues to improve. But I think we will see more and more veterinary specific or more veterinary training data used to improve these AI models. But once we flip from AI to more of an AGI, I think we're going to see just a total revolution in how people communicate and interact with their clinicians.
So another question. So help me help the audience. What is ChatGPT?
So ChatGPT is OpenAI's interface for their GPT large language model. These large language models have essentially lots and lots of clever neural networks in them that are quite different and more advanced than the previous generation of large language models, which means that they're much, much better at understanding context. So it's like a chat bot, and as you chat to it, it can really provide a level of understanding that is vastly different to what language interpretation was before. So we can ask I think a really good example, or maybe not for all of our veterinary listeners, but one daily, often I will use ChatGPT and I will ask it code questions. And as a programmer, I can give it very little information. I can say, look, I'm trying to do this, and it will gather the context and it will spit out an answer. And that level of understanding is a really big jump that we've seen through these large language models. So the GPT 3.5 and then now with GPT-4, that has just been this exponential improvement in how AI understands intent and context from how you communicate with it.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And I paint the picture of like, imagine you want to Google something, and the thing that you want to Google is complex. Like, what should my itinerary be in this Caribbean country for the next 4 days of my thing? And I like inexpensive street food and beaches. And it returns you a well-written paragraph with an itinerary that you'd typically pay a travel agent money to do, and it does it in seconds. And so I find a lot of people that I know in my world are using it for the example that you've given, to write, more proficient code or maybe solve deep technical issues. But then for everyday listeners in the veterinary industry, just go to type Chat GPT in and Google it and find it, sign up for a free account and ask it a complex question. I mean, the internet's been blowing up about, diagnostic reports that have happened with veterinary cases and this AI saving pets' lives. But I think you called out something really important, that there's an art to the field of veterinary medicine that's never going to go away. But I think having people be informed in this method makes sense. Give it a try, see what's out there. It might solve a problem that you didn't know you had.
Yeah, and I think what's fascinating is to the end of what you just said, you could ask it that question, and then you could even say, and now reply to me as if it was, as if you're Shakespeare, and it will do that as well. The power of this model is absolutely amazing. And you can get it to write emails and do all of these things where it's taking away that kind of some of the more mundane aspects, but it's the level of understanding that's so different.
So if we had to stretch out your journey for the next 5 years for digital practice, Oliver, what's the most exciting thing that you guys are working on? And then why should people check out your guys' solution?
Yeah, thanks for that. I think this is a good question. So it may not surprise you that one of the most exciting things we're working on is whether or not we can integrate large language models to help to improve make the lives of vets and veterinary staff easier. And that is certainly not, again, kind of providing diagnostic data, but more just helping to streamline those processes and those interactions. And I think that's really exciting, although I think we're a way off of that. I think what for us, it's really seeing the results of what we've put out there so far, particularly around the process improvements. And the latest thing that we're coming out, not 5 years, but I guess a couple of months, is really improving product order requests and those flows and the communications around that, automating those. But I think it's really, how can you maximize your physical resource through leveraging these virtual interactions? So you have a limited physical resource, both in terms of your vet allocation and your consultation rooms, and how much of what you're doing can be virtualized. And as a profession, I think we initially leapt on telemedicine being synchronous solution, and I think a synchronous teleconsult has a place. But I think the other thing the pandemic taught us is it's not a panacea. It's still a synchronous interaction, which requires both people that resource to be, in the same place at the same time. And actually, what the asynchronous interactions bring is just a much higher level of efficiency. You can send rich media to and fro, videos of cases, photos of cases, and the client can be doing this, like watching Netflix, right? Like at 10 p.m. at night, and then the next day you can look at that reply, and people are so used to that as a way of communicating with their friends and family that it comes very naturally to have that asynchronous interaction.
Yeah, that's fascinating and super duper exciting. I mean, I've seen that just last week with my bank. I sent them a thing, and the next day I woke up and the answer was there. And I was like,
Yeah.
This is so much better than waiting on hold for 4 hours.
Yeah, and even live chat, right, which is kind of like asynchronous chat, but still synchronous. You have to cut the number of times that I've waited for a response and then I've gone and multitasked and suddenly forgotten about it and come back and the agent's gone. And all of these things have a place, right? Synchronous interactions have a place, phone calls have a place, in-person interactions have a place, but asynchronous virtual messages, definitely have a big place. And I think that's what we're really excited to see develop now.
Absolutely. Well, very exciting conversation. Unfortunately, we ran out of time as we usually do. And before we ask you our last two questions, where can people find digital practice? How do they find your product, and how do they get to try it?
Yeah, so they can go to digitalpractice.vet, and there's information there, as well as ways of signing up or expressing interest. And there's a list of which practice management systems we integrate with. And if we don't integrate with the one that you're using, then nagging your PMS supplier to integrate with us is would be a benefit to us and a benefit to you. And as I say, we can add those integrations pretty quickly. So we're super keen to integrate as widely as we can.
Awesome. And the questions that we usually ask at the end, one of them is there a book, podcast, TED Talk, or even a YouTube video that you would recommend our listeners?
Yes, this was a really hard one, but I think particularly with the topic of our conversation, the interview by Lex Friedman with Sam Altman, who's the CEO of OpenAI, on Lex Friedman's podcast, recently, I think was fascinating. Lex is a technical interviewer; he's got a technical background, and he asked some really interesting questions. But even though he's got that technical background, it's quite approachable, I think, for anyone if they want to try and understand what's going on, particularly in the field of AI and this move towards AGI.
Awesome. And then the last question is another recommendation for someone that you think we should have on the show.
Yeah, I guess it's slight sort of reverse nepotism here, and that I was going to recommend my father, who is Bradley Viner. He's an ex-president of the Royal College, but where he's done a lot of work is in clinical governance, and other aspects of looking at general practice as a specialty, as we talked about earlier. And I think he's got a lot of experience and would be an interesting person to talk to.
Thank you so much for listening to the Veterinary Innovation Podcast. If you want to hear about our new episodes, please follow us on any social media channel. Also, you can check out our website at veterinaryinnovationpodcast.com. See you next week.